Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of the Nichecast. It is the return of the Nichecast. After the storm, we are from theniche-case.com, home of major Aotearoa sporting yarn and kōrero. On the website at the moment, we've got fresh yarns about the Blackcaps, second test versus England preview. We got Steven Adams hasn't been playing, so there's a big old yarn about Steven Adams with the Memphis Grizzlies. There's also flying Kiwis, fresh flying Kiwis. Was it like a double whammy this week, is how you posed it?
Yeah, pretty much. I included the stuff that I would have done last week if I'd been able to do it last week. So double
So
banger,
you
yeah.
bumper, jam-packed, full of Aotearoa footballing action around the world. I've also done we had the Super Smash debrief, so I found those storylines and those performances quite interesting. So there's a Northern men and Canterbury women debrief. We've got an HBJ Shield, women's one-day cricket. There's an update there with 5 things from that. We've had Kiwi NRL Spotlight on the trial rounds. There's lots of information there. There's also lots of information about the Warriors that you can go back and read to make sure you're tuned in, tapped in with everything Aotearoa Warriors. Is there a Breakers previewy type of thing coming live soon?
Probably not. Well, maybe I might incorporate some previewy stuff. After this, do want to try write a thing about them, more specifically about like the difference between last season and this season, and because I'm still baffled by that. I'm still baffled by how they went from by far the worst team in the competition to easily the second best.
Stay tuned for that. And that's just one of the many things you'll be able to read on our website, theniche-case.com. If you love to read about Aotearoa sport, if you love to learn a bit about Aotearoa sport, head on over to theniche-case.com. And speaking of learning, that's what we're going to do on this podcast. We're just going to learn about some Kiwi sports things and discuss them, share our insights that we've gained. So hopefully you can learn something as well. But we're going to cover a bunch of topics, some of those we just mentioned, through the learning lens. What have we been learning about the Blackcaps, the White Ferns, the Football Ferns, Flying Kiwis, Wellington Phoenix, the Warriors, NRL, Steven Adams? We've been learning. And I'm going to hijack the mindfulness for this podcast, if you don't mind, because you were a victim of Papatūānuku and Ranganui, the forces of Mother Nature and Father Sky, as many Kiwis have, probably a lot worse off than yourself, much far worse off than myself. So I think for me, there wasn't much, didn't really suffer anything. So you kind of just learn about the gratitude and, well, things are actually pretty good for me. So how about gratitude and just being thankful that nothing else, nothing worse has happened to myself personally. You were in the up to your neck in the storm. What was something that you learned on a mindfulness ting from the storm?
What did I learn? Well, the obvious one is the like, don't fight against Mother Nature. You're not going to win an arm wrestle against Mother Nature kind of thing. That's a nice, sturdy lesson to begin with. And the overarching thing, because it's like, you kind of, I don't know, you can't swim against the tide, so to speak, with those kind of things. You kind of just got to go with the flow. So when the power gets knocked out and it takes a week to put it back on, you like, you just can't get stressed about something beyond your control, right? You just got to kind of make the most of the situation, made the most of the fine library establishments around town was definitely a help in a time of need. I actually quite enjoyed working at the library as well. I found there's like a formality to it in a way where it's almost like going to the office and clocking in and clocking out, but in a way where it's like it's entirely on my schedule and I'm sort of, and it's, you know, it's a nice peaceful environment to work in as well. I found that I don't know, quite productive, even though the bloody 3 hour parking outside the thing was definitely an inhibiting factor. That was not ideal. I needed more than 3 hour days, but then also I don't want to have to be paying like $12 per day for parking for a whole week, and then that's no fun. When I'm normally able to work a short walk from my bedroom, I can work. I What else did I learn? Um,
Just one thing's
uh,
fine. Yeah, like,
well, it's I kind of liked as well the idea of when I got home from the library from a thing of work, the day was done. Like I couldn't plug my computer in again because there was no electricity, so it was done. I didn't have to feel like, there's this other thing I just want to finish up. I'll just give it another 20 minutes, which turns into 2 hours kind of thing, which often happens normally. I don't find myself working till 8, 9 o'clock or something because I want to finish this article before tomorrow because then I can sleep in and push that time. But um, that was probably something I might try to incorporate a little bit more, like the old hard finish to the day. Like, okay, I'm done. Whatever. I didn't finish it today, but I'll finish it tomorrow and free my mind. And then also, I quite enjoyed the old because there's nothing to do except read, really. Like, because you also couldn't go outside while it was stormy. Towards the end, when we still didn't have electricity, that was different because the summer returned in a really ironic way. But before that, like, it's pouring with rain, it's windy outside, it's cold, it's wet. You don't want to, it wasn't that cold, but it was definitely wet. What are you going to do? I'm just like sitting there reading books and whatever, but also don't have electric light. So I'm now a big fan of the old candles. I find reading by candlelight is quite nice because it's a softer, more natural light. It doesn't. It's not as much of it. You can like, I don't know. People say this about like turning down the backlight on your phone after a certain time. There's like settings you can do that with because they say that the hard electrical light is not great for being able to put your phone down, switch off, and go to sleep straight afterwards. It's sort of like an easing off period. I found the old candlelight worked quite nicely for that purpose. So I think I learned quite a lot from not ever. I also learned how to operate the old 1970s Swedish camping stove. 80% butane, 20% propane solution worked nicely. Got the water boiled that way. Cooked some pasta on the thing. It was nice. Wasn't any different to using a normal stovetop, except that it was outside for fear of everything like the house exploding. So lots of lessons to be taken from a week without power. Just don't want to do it again anytime soon.
big up anyone who is familiar with the gas stove for like use of spots maybe. And also
Sure.
I'm not sure how much you know about the glass candle. Are you aware of the glass candle? I've been learning a bit about the glass candle from Game of Thrones, well, A Song of Ice and Fire. Do you have any glass candle thoughts off the top of your head?
No, I don't even know what you mean.
It's just
What? Explain the glass candle thing.
some Jerry in the in Old Town. He's got this glass candle, and he's like, he can see things, and because there's more magic at that time of A Song of Ice and Fire, the glass candle's fired up, and it's like this crazy light. All the colors are sharper, but the shadow is also darker. So I don't know what that means, but you brought up candle, and I do love a candle. I do like the dim lights, especially at nighttime. You don't want
Yeah,
bright lights at
definitely.
nighttime, but shout out to the candle, shout out to the gas stove for cooking purposes and any other purposes you might have. Shout out to Aotearoa. Right, we're here to spin a yarn, have a bit of fun, and discuss Aotearoa sport. Do have the Patreon podcast. There are, throughout this 2 week stint, let's call it that, the storm, have had the Patreon podcast, and I am doing the Kiwi NRL podcast as well, the Kiwi NRL Spotlight. So that has been there as well as the Blackcaps conversations. So you can listen to those. Those come out earlier in the week on Patreon. And I will keep doing the Kiwi NRL Spotlight throughout the season. We might get in some football.
Maybe at some point.
Yeah, so we might
Playing
spark
catch
up
up at the moment, so I don't have the time. But
not
we'll see how it
tomorrow,
goes.
but like we do plan to offer maybe a bit more niche collection of niches on the Patreon podcast as well. So that is the best way to support the Niche Cache and all our content. Patreon.com/our Niche Cache, EL Niche Cache. join up the Patreon, support us straight up the guts, and we do deliver extra podcasts as well there. And every Monday and Friday, we are sending out our email newsletter, which just includes a whole lot of relevant current event Aotearoa sporting information. For the website, the niche-cage.com, we kind of got the deep dives. Lots of stats, lots of wrinkles, lots of nuance, lots of context for your needs, your Aotearoa sporting needs. And then every Monday and Friday, via the email newsletter, we do like to just empty the tank of Aotearoa sporting information that we are covering. So if you love Aotearoa sports, it's all a bit mandatory. You need it. And if you love Aotearoa as we love Aotearoa, hopefully you can bring a bit of light and positivity to your day. I'm looking along this this menu that we've got here of Kiwi sporting topics, and the New Zealand Breakers are the team offering the most light and good vibes and celebration of Aotearoa in the Kiwi sporting sense. They're in the finals. Like, the Breakers are in the finals. They are winning. They are one of the best NBL teams this season. You mentioned their turnaround from last season, and we have talked a lot about the journey the Breakers have been on. We always tie it in with the Phoenix and the Warriors, and we've gone over that a lot. So we'll try and, I don't know, we're going to keep everything of like, what are we learning about the Breakers in this specific conversation? But I do feel like we have shared the story of the Breakers. So I don't know if we want to just regurgitate that, but depends what you're learning. Because the Breakers are in the final. They face the Sydney Kings. One thing I did learn about was Xavier Cooks was playing in the New Zealand NBL last season. Was he the MVP?
He might have been, actually. I can't remember, but if he wasn't, he easily could have been. He would have been the most talented player in the competition. So
he was the man in the New Zealand NBL, and he's also the man for the Sydney Kings. We've also got Tommy Vodanovic. Did he win a championship with Sydney last season, or was it the season before?
Yeah, last season won a championship as a role player with the Sydney Kings, and now he's swapped sides and he's playing against the Sydney Kings in the subsequent finals. I'm sure he's learned plenty.
That's a couple of funky wrinkles there. The Breakers are really good at basketball. When I say like what, because I'm fizzing with learnings from the Breakers. Like they are, they're just bringing so much winning culture, identity to the Aotearoa sporting landscape. What have you learned about the Breakers that you've been thinking a lot about over the past couple of days as they have sealed their final spot?
Well, the main thing is the thing that I feel like we've been learning all season. It is sort of a regurgitation of what you're saying before, but it's just like how much easier it is to be successful when you have a good head coach in place, when you have a stable defensive foundation, I suppose, and when you have a strong team culture. And I don't feel like the Breakers really have had any of those things since the ownership switch, like since Paul Henare left. I don't really think that's been something you could say about them at any point. And they had difficult times with the old, spending seasons stuck in Australia and whatnot. And it was worse for them, I think, probably than the others, because the Phoenix and Warriors just seemed better organized. They were able to find home bases, and at least, okay, we're not where we want to be, but at least we're set somewhere. Whereas the Breakers bounced around a little bit. And I think that's probably a little bit of, I don't know, you'd probably say the organization didn't quite set things up as well as they could have, but it was also a thing where even no one really knew what the lay of the land was with that situation. There's a lot of making stuff up as it went along, because that's the only way you could operate in unforeseen circumstances. But definitely, even despite that, the Breakers were not a well-run organization up until this year, when suddenly they seem just a completely well-oiled machine. And I know that Modi Mayor has to get the overwhelming majority of that, because he's the main shift. Like, that's the main difference. But yeah, I mean, it's just been a complete season of learning, watching the Breakers get back to get back to the kind of foundations that they had when they were successful in the past, and which they shouldn't have gone away from in the first place. It was pretty clear. New ownership wanted to make a bit of a splash and whatnot, and maybe thought that things might be a little bit easier to do that than it perhaps proved to be. But like, Moni Mayor just said the right things as soon as he took over. He was saying the right things. We want to bring back the Kiwi core of the team. We want a team that the community can be proud of, which represents the people in its environment. We want a team that's going to be built upon like those defensive foundations where even if we having an off scoring night, the shots aren't dropping, we know we can still be competitive because we can stop the other team from getting what they want to do. And on top of that, just and this is one that does flow into the semifinals thing. Just the caliber of your imports determines so much. Like the thing what I was saying about like having the local core, the defensive foundation, strong coach, that's what sets you up to be a competitive team. The thing that turns you into a championship contender is the caliber of your imports in this league. Like, it's pretty much that simple. The caliber of your imports doesn't matter if you don't have those other things in place, or at least, I don't know, 2 out of 3, the majority of it. But if you do, and you don't have great imports, you're going to be a solid team who can beat any team on their day, but maybe aren't going to make it this far. Like, if you have all of those things in place and then you also sign 3 outstanding imports, you can win the title. That's how you do it. That's the formula in the NBL. And I mean, Derek Pardon, Jarrell Brantley fouled out of that game 3 the other day against the Tasmania Jack Jumpers, but he still, I'm pretty sure he got like, I don't know. While he was out there, he was cooking. Like, he got some points, he got some rebounds, he did what he had to do. Derek Pardon played on his last foul for the last 5 minutes or so of that game. Impeccable defense, despite that. Like, he plays hard, he plays aggressive. He conceded exactly as many fouls as he's allowed to without fouling out, and he got like 15 points and 14 rebounds or something. He was fantastic. He was the heart of their defensive effort in that game. And Barry Brown Jr. was just unstoppable. I think he got 32 points on like 16 shots or something. He was flawless at the free throw line. Him and Isaiah Leafa were the only guys who seemed to be able to hit a 3-pointer that game. And I mean, just even when the game seemed to be in a little bit of balance at one stage in the fourth quarter, where it's like the Jack Jumpers were hanging around, that foul trouble was keeping the Breakers from pushing away. All of a sudden, Brown just comes in, gets this little like lefty layup with the spin off the backboard, and then he hits a 3-pointer the next possession. And then I think they went on like a 13-2 run or something like that, and he scored 11 of those points. This is in the fourth quarter of a semifinal decider. It was unbelievable. And if you've got an import who can do that, like, sky's the limit in the NBL. Like, that's, the Breakers have just ticked all those boxes, and for that reason, I think they're second best in terms of like talent across the board compared to the Sydney Kings. Kings are deserved favorites. They've been the best team all season, but the Breakers can win the title. Well, I'm sure of that. I'm sure I've learned enough to believe that the Breakers can win the title because they've got all the elements that it goes into being able to win a title. And man, it's just about whether they can do it. It's about whether they can stop the Kings and get a little bit more than they do across 5 games, actually. I think it's a 5-game series. And the funny thing is, there's a FIBA window at the moment. So there are actually some Tall Blacks games, although no Breakers players involved for obvious reasons. But there's another week until the NBL finals actually start. So well, won't learn anything over the next 7 days, I'll say. But then after that, it's really going to kick on because it's a 5-game final series. And that's some hectic basketball. That means at least, or it should mean at least 2 home games. I think it goes away, home, away, like alternates each time. So games 2 and 4 should be at home, I believe is how it works. That's another thing I learned, which home finals. It's pretty important.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because Breakers won at home. They go away to Tasmania. They lose that game, and both their home games, first and third game, they won quite considerably, and it was also great to see the imports standing up in that biggest moment. Like, whether it's home or away, you're 1-1 in a series. You need to win this game to go to the final, and your best players step up and perform. So it's very impressive, and we'll keep track of the Breakers ahead of NBL finals. Are these Tall Blacks games like in the friendly realms? They're not necessarily
Sort
qualification,
of.
or
They are World Cup qualifiers, but I think I'm pretty sure they've already qualified for the World Cup. So it's sort of just like finishing off the fixtures. They're games that they'll probably win. They got strong teams, even without all the Breakers dudes. They've still got teams of overwhelming like NBL talent. So, they should be all right. Funny thing about the Breakers home and away as well is that through the regular season, their away record was actually way better than their home record. Like for whatever reason, their home record was like 7-7 or something like that. Their away record was like 11-3 or can't remember exactly, but I think that's what it was. But come finals time, with a big raucous crowd, it does make all the difference. Like a 5-0 run feels like a 10-0 run when the crowd is behind you and cheering every action.
we are also learning about Steven Adams and his value to the Memphis Grizzlies, because the Memphis Grizzlies are not winning many games with Steven Adams, and you've seen it peppered across the internet. Like the Memphis Grizzlies record since old mate Jerry had a little sideline altercation with the Memphis Grizzlies team, and everyone's throwing it up like Memphis Grizzlies record since the Shannon Sharpe incident, like this many losses. That also coincides with Steven Adams, and obviously we are massively biased towards Steven Adams. We thought that his impact and his influence on the Memphis Grizzlies was being underrated. Now you've got a massive stint where he's not playing, and the Memphis Grizzlies are clearly not as good. And I think it's baffling to some people, like how Steven Adams can be so important to the Memphis Grizzlies. It's like, sure, like you've got Ja Morant, you've got Jaren Jackson Jr., you've got like everything's there, but you're losing. Your half-court offense sucks. Like, yeah, because Steven Adams is making paths in the offense in the half. Like Ja Morant dunks from Steven Adams. Like Steven Adams is standing there passing the ball to everyone. He's not just getting rebounds. Like he is a fulcrum, as we've said before, a focal point of their offense, let alone all the other like intangible stuff, gritty stuff, Kiwi stuff that Steven Adams does. So I don't know if there's anything new to that other than reinforcing our initial learnings. Is there anything new?
I mean, bigger picture, no. Like we already knew this. It's a learning for a lot of other people, though. It's something because like that, the so-called Shannon Sharpe incident was literally the game before Steven Adams got injured. Like he played that game, they lost. It was the end of they were on an 11-game win streak, and they lost that game to the Lakers. They then lost the next game to the Phoenix Suns, and it was on the last play of that game that Steven Adams tried to get a steal to keep them in the game, and like dive out of bounds, landed on his sort of right kneecap, and got up very slowly from that. That was presumably when he suffered the injury, and we haven't seen him since. They're coming back from I think they got it's either today, Thursday, or tomorrow, Friday, that they're playing against Philadelphia 76ers, but they've said that Adams isn't going to play those games. He's not going to play that game. He's not going to play probably the next game after that. So we're at least 2 more games away from that. So I was hoping it was going to be a nice, like well-aligned all-star break finishes, and he's ready to go. Not quite. So we're getting towards they said 3 to 5 weeks. We're getting towards the 5-week of that estimate now. But I mean, they're probably just playing a little bit safe. They've done this a lot. Is the thing with the Memphis Grizzlies is pretty much everyone has had injuries. Like Ja Morant's had some time out this season. He actually came back a lot quicker than anyone expected, but there was the sort of month last season where Ja Morant was out. Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't play the start of this season. Dylan Brooks didn't play the start of last season. Desmond Bane had that broken toe, missed a good chunk of the first half of this season. Like all their starters have had extended time out at some point in the last 2 years. So I think they're probably just playing it a little bit safe with him, making sure he's good to go. But yeah, as far as learnings go, we definitely learned a lot of, I think, specifics. Like we didn't learn that Steven Adams is an integral part of the Memphis Grizzlies team who facilitates everything that they do, and there's guys around him all play way better when he's there because he allows them to play better, because he does things which strengthens their strengths, so to speak. We didn't learn that because we already knew that. Other people have learned that. What we've learned is like really tangible ways in which we can see how the Memphis Grizzlies are worse without him. And those tangible ways, pretty much everything. That's the weird thing. I did like a thing of stats for the Kiwi Steve piece, and the only thing of the notable things that I picked out, like there are a few that I ignored, like block rates and things like that have been stable because Adams isn't necessarily the dude who goes out and gets the blocks. That's Jaren Jackson, so that's stayed the same. Things like that. Assist rates is pretty similar. Like there's things that have stayed relatively the same. Pretty much everything else has got worse without him. Like they're including all the overarching stats, so net ratings, offensive rating, defensive rating, points per game, points allowed per game. All the shooting percentages are worse without him on the floor, even though Steven Adams isn't a shooter. What are we talking about? Yeah, but he makes everyone else better at shooting. But he doesn't space the floor because he can't shoot 3-pointers. You don't need to shoot 3-pointers to space the floor. You just need to set a heavy screen. If a big screen creates a meter of space for Desmond Bane or Ja Morant to shoot in, that's as good as a defender standing a meter off because he knows he has to respect your jump shot. That's exactly the same thing. An open shot is an open shot, no matter how you get to it. And he's the best screener in the NBA. He's also the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. And what does offensive rebounds means? It means you'll miss shots, you get a second chance. He gets bonus positions for the team. And that's like that you can't even, I mean, it means that there are, because the Memphis Grizzlies haven't actually been a great shooting percentage team. They got a couple dudes who are very good. Desmond Bane, absolute gun from 3-pointers. Luke Kennard, who they picked up at the trade deadline, very good 3-point shooter as well. But there's, Dylan Brooks drags everything down. Ja Morant is up and he's hot and cold with his jump shot. He's incredible when he can get to the rim. Of course, getting to the rim often requires running around a Steven Adams screen, which isn't there at the moment as well. So he's still doing that, but he's probably having to work harder to do that than he would otherwise, which is probably affecting their defensive capabilities as well. The only thing that didn't take a notable drop off, and this will be to the surprise of absolutely anyone, it's the free throw shooting. Like the free throw shooting's got slightly better as a team without Steven Adams, but everything else is worse without him on the court. And it's like stark. It's blatant. It's like bare naked for everyone to see. The impact that Steven Adams has on that team. It's extremely obvious when you get that period of a month where he's not there, and suddenly absence makes the heart grow fonder.
I'm not sure how that looks for the Blackcaps. Like, the absence of the two best bowlers in the World Test Championship. Fondness isn't a word I'd describe. I'm certainly fond of Trent Bolt. Love a bit of Bolty. Love a bit of Kyle Jamison. I'm fond of them. But they're not there, and worrying about them being not there does absolutely nothing to help the Blackcaps right now. We're in this Blackcaps Test Series versus England. And for those who aren't aware, England is a far better Test cricket team than New Zealand. It's fairly obvious. It kind of smashes you in the face when you dive into it. 4 tests in a row, England defeat New Zealand. England are on like a 6-test win streak. They're on win streaks coming out their ears. They are really good at Test cricket. Blackcaps are now losing tests in Aotearoa. They've lost at least 1 test of each of their last 3 home series. This series, South Africa, Bangladesh. They lost 1 test in each of those series. Basically 50-50. If they can win the next one, they'll definitely be 50-50 right now.
It'll also mean 3 series in a row without a series victory, though, at home, which is considering where they were before that, where they had was it like an 18-test unbeaten streak?
Yep.
And suddenly they can't win series, let alone...
They have gone from being unbeatable in New Zealand to being 50-50. That is the reality. So, like, if you're thinking the Black Caps are good at Test cricket, easy on. Let's like lower your expectations. I think we're in. Again, it's important with the Black Caps. I have to like remind myself this: they are good at T20 international and ODI cricket. They are a very good limited overs team. Say it all the time. Last 4 World Cups, ODI, T20s, 2 each. They've made 3 finals. 4 World Cups, 3 finals, and 1 semi-final. Like, what do you want to do? They're good at that ODI cricket. They're good at T20 cricket. Test cricket, I'm in a bit of a Warriors zone where you just need to lower the expectations. I think we're seeing that with the football Ferns, maybe. We're seeing it with the white Ferns as well. We just need to have realistic expectations of who these teams are. With cricket, it's kind of format dependent. And England's just far better at Test cricket. That's the thing I've learned. And it hurts to say, yeah, it's kind of shitty watching England have all this fun in Test cricket. But I'll tell you what, they made that first Test fun. Because watching the Black Caps try and bowl with like 3 bully bowlers on a dead pitch wasn't fun at all. Like, England made that Test fun, so shout out to England. I'm enjoying your cricket. Unfortunately, you're much better at Test cricket than the Black Caps.
Yeah, luckily I couldn't actually watch it, so I didn't have to see that. I listened to a large portion, like while I was at the library, I was timing my things so that I could be there during the hours when the cricket was on. And I was listening. At first, I couldn't find which radio channel it was on, the New Zealand coverage. Eventually did. It was on, I can't remember what it's called. I'm so tuned out of these things. But I ended up listening to TalkSport, the English broadcast, which was way better. Not without its issues. There was a really cringe moment where, because Frankie Mackay and Daniel McCarty actually were the 2 New Zealanders who were chipping on the broadcast. And Daniel McCarty is such a good commentator because he's done some National League football and he does a lot of the Phoenix women's home games as well. And if you can be a really good commentator at multiple sports, that's just good broadcaster material. And I think cricket's a lot better than other sports at recognizing that people who are great radio commentators on sports become good TV commentators as well. Whereas it doesn't necessarily go the other way because you get people sitting there used to telly and just like not actually telling you what's happening. Oh, good shot. Yeah, what was the shot? Where was it bowled? How did he hit it? You know, there was a cringe moment where Frankie Mackay was asked by Neil Manthorpe about about the ways in which New Zealand's doing much better these days in addressing its ugly colonial history, and he said it in a way where it's like, you know, where you realize where colonialism came from. It wasn't this thing that sprung out of the waters in New Zealand. It was brought here by the English, and especially when he's an English South African as well. It's like, bro, the histories we're talking about here. Why are you putting Frankie Mackay on the spot? Come on. She handled it nicely though. She's also a very good commentator. But I also had moments listening to that where it was like, okay, let's use some of my spare data and more importantly, phone battery here. Listen to a bit of the old cricket on the. We've just lost another wicket. Okay, we've lost a set. Okay, I'm either going to throw my phone out the window right now or I'm going to turn it off and go do something else. Light a candle and read a book. There's a bit of that going on as well. It was a frustrating series, especially. I don't know if it was more frustrating for not being able to watch and only listening to it, or if actually that might have made it slightly more palatable than it would have been otherwise. I suspect maybe the latter, to be honest. I don't know. The Black Caps have dug themselves into a corner because they're a very conservative team in general. Not necessarily the cricket they play. I think that can be conservative, but it's also they're aggressive within their means. Like they know what they're good at, and they will bowl to a plan, and they'll they assess conditions very well. Things like this. A few losses in that regard in the last 12 months, I would say, in terms of their impeccable assessing of conditions. It's not quite what it has been. Particularly home conditions, which is really quite a concern. Maybe it's just because they just haven't played as much cricket in Aotearoa recently, and the Mount Maunganui is a new venue for tests. There's only been about 4 or 5 tests there, so maybe there's a bit of that as well, just figuring out what it means there. But I thought, as soon as I saw the selections for that team, I'm like, they've kicked themselves, like they've shot themselves in the foot here. Like, because you could see it's like why are they picking Kugelheim for a couple of reasons, but we're focusing on the cricketing reasons. Why are they picking a dude who's averaging like 60 this year in Plunket Shield and hasn't been on a level for test selection for at least 2 years? Like, why are they picking Blair Tickner even though he seems to be one of the next guys up? It very quickly became obvious they just want guys who can hit the deck hard and bowl bounces, and none of them are fast enough to do it properly. Even Neil Wagner is like, there was a distinct, just Wagner didn't. It might just be because England's batters are really good and they knew what was coming. McCullum especially very used to this plan, and they just knew how to combat Neil Wagner. I know people have said like the pace isn't what it once was, but he was never a 140k an hour bowler is the thing. So I'm not sure if that's, maybe it is, like maybe just the 5k drop off is enough. Going from 132 to 127 kind of thing. Maybe that's enough to make those bounces a lot easier to hit. I think maybe it's just more the aggressive approach of fighting fire with fire from England was the difference. But if Neil Wagner's not getting it done, Blair Tickner and Scott Kugelheim aren't going to. It was just like, why didn't they pick a second spinner? Bracewell actually bowled quite well, but all that told me was that they should have had Sodhi in there as well, let alone the fact that he's just a better cricketer than Tickner or Kugelheim. And if sometimes it's not about picking the best like horses for courses type, sometimes you just pick the best 11 cricketers you have available, especially when you have as many out as they did. And yeah, I mean, they're probably going to still ride with Henry Nicholls, and I have defended Henry Nicholls a lot. I really like him as a batter, but I also really like Will Young, and I think it's like it's just sending him into the fire, Henry Nicholls, to play the second test. I don't know. And even the Michael Bracewell selection, it's like he's a more than useful off spinner. It surprised me how well he's adapted to international cricket as a spinner, but how fucking bad. Like he can't bat in these situations. Like he's averaging under 25, and that's not what he's there for. You might as well just have Mitchell Santner, except that maybe Bracewell's actually proving a slightly better bowler than Mitchell Santner did at test level. Very specific at test level there, but neither of them have done what Colin de Grandhomme used to do at 7. Nobody's doing anything close to what Trent Boult or even Kyle Jamieson used to do, and hopefully will continue to do in the future. It doesn't sound like Bolt's going to get too many more chances. I think that's also a stubborn conservative perspective from the Blackcaps, which isn't helping them. But man, I guess when you consider it, like BJ Watling has retired, Ross Taylor is retired, Trent Boult hasn't quite retired, but might be considered as retired. Colin de Grandhomme has retired. The World Test Championship wasn't that long ago, and there are 4 first 11 players who are no longer a part of the Blackcaps Test team. And that's a lot, let alone Kyle Jamieson's injury. So I think maybe there is an element of shifting our expectations, as you say, and just adjusting what we think this team is, because the players who have replaced those guys, with one exception, and I'll say Tom Blundell, Tom Blundell's just a great New Zealander. Tom Blundell's fantastic. He's been absolutely brilliant with the bat and with the gloves. He might be like the best glove man keeper in Test cricket. He might have dropped 3 catches that I didn't see in the last one, but he was brilliant in Pakistan. He's taken some very good catches. I think he's excellent in the fielding side, excellent in the batting side. None of the other guys that have left have been replaced, though, and that's where the Blackcaps are at right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been hammering home a couple of key points in the newsletter and the Patreon podcast over the past couple of days. Because you said something about like misreading conditions, and I was fascinated. I've been fascinated by the spin situation at Bay Oval for a long time. Like we've been discussing the geographical stuff and the terrain, the frontiera, all the details about assessing spin and seam conditions. And we also discussed the pink ball factor for this Bay Oval test as well, which definitely helped England. But I was interested to note that Jack Leach bowled the most overs for England in that test. And I've also been interested to learn. That's me realizing learning is the theme instead of saying like observe learning.
Yeah, right.
Like midstream. the thing I've also learned is that all 4 tests at Bay Oval, the opponent has played a specialist spinner. Jack Leach has played both tests for England at Bay Oval. You had Bangladesh 3 spinners bowled, but I think the main spinner was Mehdi Hassan. And then Pakistan had Yazir Shah and a couple of all-rounders, let's say. So at that one ground, the touring team has played a specialist spinner in every test. And the Blackcaps have gone Santner, Ravindra, Bracewell. So even though it's the pink ball, yeah, like Stuart Broad was excellent with the pink ball, like it does skew things in favor for the seam bowlers for a couple of hours. But Jack Leach is still there. So it's like, even though we've updated it with the pink ball factor, England still rolled with Jack Leach. And if conditions are making the opponent, the touring team, play with the specialist spinner in New Zealand, I don't think those conditions are conducive with bowling bouncers. Like, there's nothing bouncy about the Bay Oval deck. Like, you did get some variable bounce. I was keeping low, I was zipping up, but I just felt sorry for. I always feel sorry for Ben Stokes when he's having to do it, because he's got a bung knee and he's like, I'm the soldier of this bowling attack. I'm gonna bounce everyone with a bung knee. I know I've got a bung knee. Everyone knows I've got a bung knee, but I'm still gonna do it because I'm the man. That's one thing, and I felt sorry for Ben Stokes anytime he does it. I feel sorry for Neil Wagner trying to bowl bouncers on that deck at 128 Ks. I kind of feel bad for Kugelheim and Tickner in that instance. They might want to bowl full and swing the ball, but on a deck that's not offering a whole lot, they are being asked to bowl short and be bullies. I've got this theory of nibblers and bullies. England had 3 nibblers and 1 bully. The Blackcaps had 1 nibbler and 3 bullies in their seam attack, which isn't a good ratio for starters because they're all the same. Right arm bullies, Wagner's left arm, sorry. So they're all like similar. But it's on a pitch that isn't that bouncy. Like, it's a bit dusty. It favored Bangladesh. Like, it's not ideal. So I'm curious about how they're reading that. And I think Basin Reserve, what do we know about the Basin Reserve? What have you learned about the Basin Reserve as far as like breeding a test game, giving birth to a game of test cricket?
Not the worst not the worst in the country in terms of spin, but also not the place you're necessarily gonna need a spinner. Surprisingly, I think, because you assume Wellington, the big thing everyone says is like bowling into the breeze and whatever. I'm gonna have a workhorse bowler who can do that. The main thing I think we've seen from the Basin Reserve in the last 5 or so years is lots of runs.
So England's batters were already exceptional in that test. Now they're going to a deck that favors batsmen. Like, that's where Brendan McCullum scored his big old 300 and stuff like that. So a lot of runs get scored at Basin Reserve, and you've got an England attack who love to smack boundaries. You've got a Blackcaps bowling attack that kind of looks mundane. It's interesting. Also, Michael Bracewell and Mitchell Santner are the same cricketer.
Yeah.
So I don't know like what Michael Bracewell does better than Santner. I don't know what Santner does better than Bracewell. They're both pretty good fielders. I think I love Santner's fielding. He's got the below the knee throw. It's all amazing. But Michael Bracewell's a good catcher. So they're similar abilities, but one's the test all-rounder and one isn't. One was hated on as a test all-rounder. Like, I think we're all kind of in unison as well, of not viewing Mitchell Santner as a certified test cricketer, but the same player has replaced him.
Yeah. And as you pointed out in the email, it's not just their role in the test team is the same thing, but also their first class records are basically identical as well.
Yeah, it's quite strange. I don't know what to do. Like, I saw something written about Bolt where the journalist, the reporter, shared inside like information of like this person says Bolt is over it. This person says New Zealand cricket's over Bolt, and it's like every one of your sources is contradicting the other one. So that is to say, who knows what's going on there? But he's obviously not playing. So however we got here, we've got to let it go. He's not playing this test against England. I don't know when he'll play again. It's kind of like Kyle Jamieson. At this stage of his journey, like, who's to say when Kyle Jamieson will return? Because yeah, he's going to have an operation. He'll be out 4 to 5 months. Yeah, he's going to be ramped back up to cricket loads, and you can say all that. But Kyle Jamieson also missed years due to injury before he played for the Blackcaps. So you can't say 4 to 5 months when this dude already has a unfortunate history with injury. So him and Bolt,
it back injury specifically as well, isn't it?
I think that's the obvious thing to say when you're that tall when you're bowling. Like
but was it when he was at Canterbury and he was out for like at least a year? It might have been a back then as well. I can't remember.
Might have been a foot. I don't know. It was like 2017, 18.
Yeah.
But it's to say, like, Bolt and Jamieson are similar. Like, we can't rely on them to be there. So it doesn't matter how we got here. Somehow they need to find a way to take 20 wickets. And I don't think they're going to do it in this test match, given everything I just said. And if your seam attack is more mundane and can't do the job, maybe select a spinner.
Right? At least get through some overs.
Just help out. Like, do something different. I don't know.
Well, Matt Henry's coming back for this test, though, isn't he? So that makes a big difference because he is at least, if Bolt's not going to be considered a test cricketer anymore, then Matt Henry becomes a first 11 player. And that obviously, anytime you can bring back a first 11 player is a very important thing. It helps immensely, especially because they don't seem to want to bolster up their batting lineup, which maybe, I don't know. Henry Nicholls has got to be on his last thing. But other than that, you trust Mitchell to score. So Mitchell did score some runs. He was really good. He saved us from being bowled out for double figures in the fourth innings. Kane Williamson, he did pretty well. I'm pretty sure he timed up in Pakistan, didn't he? Like he'll come right at some point. Like he just had a bad test. So did Tom Latham. Unfortunately, when you're too Devon Conway did get 70 odd in the first innings, but that's one good innings out of 6 from your 3 best batters. Your number 4 is notoriously out of form right now. Your number 7 has never really shown anything at test level. The batting lineup looks frisky if your top 3 don't deliver, and they didn't deliver in the first test. Partly due to also, England declaring when they did to make sure they got an hour with the pink ball is pretty clever work. And unfortunately, it worked out both times that they were able to bowl to our top order in England, the evening session. So they played that test perfectly. Yeah, they're a better team. What are you going to do? Like, a better team is going to win more often than not. And that's probably something we might have to mention again when we talk about white ferns and football ferns coming up.
One thing before that. The 5 bowlers used by New Zealand in this World Test Championship cycle who averaged 30 or below with the ball aren't currently playing.
Well, one of them would be Lieutenant Ross Taylor, would it not?
Yeah, so you got Taylor, Sodhi, Bolt, Jamieson, de Grandhomme. So none of them are playing. So that means every Blackcaps bowler currently playing averages over 30 in this World Test Championship cycle. And Daryl Mitchell is the only one conceding less than 3 runs and over. Kalyn de Grandhomme conceded 2.15 RPO. Daryl Mitchell is conceding 2.59. Daryl Mitchell can't get a bowl, so he's not really bowling. De Grandhomme, as we know, is dipped out. So you've got this thing where the bowlers aren't really taking that many wickets, they're also unable to dot them up and build pressure that way, which is what used to happen when the Blackcaps bowlers were firing. Now they're leaking runs. Now they're not taking wickets. So it's just something to keep an eye on. Speaking of not taking wickets or scoring runs in the footballing sense, I don't think the football Ferns have, if they were cricketers, they're not scoring a whole lot of runs or taking a whole lot of wickets. The White Ferns didn't do that at the T20 World Cup, and there is a similarity. We are learning about both these teams and where they sit in their international sporting realms. I might offer the White Ferns perspective, and then you can offer the football Ferns perspective, just to keep things moving along. The White Ferns, when I talk about the Blackcaps making finals and making semi-finals, the White Ferns haven't done that recently. The White Ferns are not in World Cup semi-finals. They are in a middle tier, and I believe they've been overtaken by South Africa. That was evident prior to the last World Cup. The White Ferns used to beat South Africa. Then they got smoked in a series in New Zealand. I think it was an ODI series in New Zealand ahead of the ODI World Cup. And then they stumbled against South Africa at the World Cup. And South Africa are they are flirting with semi-finals usually. The White Ferns aren't. So you got the big three, England, India, Australia. And you're kind of always looking for that fourth team. It used to be the New Zealand team. Now it's kind of South Africa, and all the other nations are getting better. Like Sophie Devine said after one of those losses, it reflects badly on domestic cricket in New Zealand. I still maintain none of this can reflect anything on domestic cricket in New Zealand when the best players are not selected. So the White Ferns aren't winning. And it's kind of because they have selected potential over performance. And if you're selecting potential over performance, you're not going to win many games. And they're not winning many games. Funny that. This World Cup, they lost to Australia and South Africa. They defeated Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. That's the White Ferns. And yeah, we're always looking for improvements. We're always hoping they get better. I think there's room to grow. There's room for development. But new coach, new regime, same result. And that's what it is. Again, this is the reality of the White Ferns. One kind of specific hole in their team. Unfortunately, it was Sophie Devine. I think she's injured. She didn't score any runs. The 19 runs she did score came at a strike rate of 61, which isn't very useful in a T20 game. And Sophie Devine, one of the best T20 bowlers in the world, wasn't bowling. So that doesn't help. And yeah, you get I'm quite happy with and I'll break this down. I think I'm going to do White Ferns debrief tomorrow. Runs from Bates, Green, and Kerr. It's fun. Quite impressed with Hannah Rowe. Amelia Kerr was good with the ball. Leah Tahuhu was good with the ball. Eden Carson was fantastic. She keeps thriving as a White Fern. But it didn't matter because every game had a different team. So, the coach had no idea what his best first 11 was. There was no cohesion, no chemistry, and he just kept making changes every game. So it's new coach, same weird vibe. And you've also got this other pocket where Jonas and Jensen, Fran Jonas and Hayley Jensen, were really good players in the Commonwealth Games, bronze medal. Same teams involved. The White Ferns finished third last year at the Commonwealth Games T20 tournament. They were good last year in all T20 cricket. Jonas comes in, 1 wicket, 3 games. Hayley Jensen, 2 wickets in 2 games. Jensen doesn't score runs now anymore. And Jensen and Jonas were the most expensive White Ferns bowlers. So you've basically gone from 2 of your best bowlers last year in T20 cricket, 2 of the worst players, and they didn't play every game in this tournament. So it's all a bit of just a hodgepodge, what the truck is going on here? I don't know. But the reality is the White Ferns are in a middle tier of international women's cricket, and I'm curious how that relates to the football Ferns.
Yeah, well, just on the White Ferns first, though, the only game I could see any of was the Aussie game. And the power went out for a bit that day, and then it came back like an hour later, and then it went out again in the afternoon, and then it came back, and then the next day it went out and didn't come back for a week. So I missed the start because I slept through it, whatever. But I watched the end of our bowling effort to Australia and actually thought they did quite well to restrict Australia to what they did. It was obviously going to be a very tough total to chase, but it was on pace to be a lot more than that. It's sort of at the halfway stage. And then the power went out for a bit, so I missed the start. I turned the TV back on when it comes on, and I'm like, they're going to be like 3 for 30, aren't they? And what do you know? They were like 25 for 4 or something. It was worse than what I thought. I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was bad. And I watched the end of it just thinking, this is so stupid. Like, you've obviously lost the game. You knew you were probably going to lose the game to Australia. Why is people just standing there closing their eyes and swinging and batting so dumb? Like, you're going to get bowled out inside the 20 overs and do like nuclear damage to your net run rate if you do that. This is a tournament. What are you doing? Like, just settle for 110 for 6 and know you're going to lose by 70 runs, but at least come out with a net run rate which is going to keep you in contention, because that's why they lost, isn't it? Is South Africa had a better net run rate in the end. Of course, not getting absolutely tonked by South Africa as well in the second game would have helped a lot, but I didn't see any of that game, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, just that like complete lack of tournament awareness was so strange to see. Surely you've been preparing for this, and you've got to know Australia are the standard bearers of women's cricket and have been for a long time. And they put up a big first innings score, which you probably weren't going to chase anyway. It was so strange.
Well, just on that, like,
yeah, go.
Those 2 games were scary. They were creepy. Because I was like, everything has changed, but every player looks afraid. Every player looks shook.
Yeah.
The coaches...
That's a good way to describe it.
The coaches are concerned. It's like, especially the Australia game, it's like you could have just chalked this one up to the cricketing gods and kept it moving. And that was also evident in the selections. Like, the selections changed. The team changed from Australia to South Africa and then Bangladesh to Sri Lanka. So you're changing your team based on what happened against Australia. Whereas, like, maybe they were like too big for their boots, and the coach was saying, you guys can really compete with Australia. You guys can get out there and really take it to them. And maybe the coach, who's Australian, put too much emphasis on that game, or you could make a case through his selection that he didn't. But that is countered by what you're saying and how they performed against Australia. They performed as if, I don't know how they didn't perform at all. So I don't know what was doing there.
Headlights kind of thing was the problem.
Yeah, but there was no plan with his selection. There was no, like, even looking through the wicket keeping stuff, like, we've gone through 3 wicket keepers under this coach. Like, what's your plan with the wicket keeper? What's your plan with Fran Jonas? Like, Haley Jensen hasn't got better. Like, it's all very similar to the previous regime. And that's the games against Australia and South Africa were severe reminders of how it felt watching them lose to West Indies, lose to South Africa, lose to England at Eden Park, get smoked by Australia at the Basin Reserve. Just all felt the same, and that was kind of weird. Football Ferns.
Football Ferns have so many overlaps with the White Ferns, it feels, in terms of, like, I don't know, so many things we're talking about. One thing I don't think that is fair to say about them, though, is that they don't have a plan, or they don't have, like, they're relatively consistent selections. I think they know who their best players are, and they sort of know how they want to play. It was interesting against Portugal. They switched up to a back 3. I thought that was quite a curious one, but it's not, Tom Samani used to do this as well, preparing for the last World Cup. He had them so that they could play with a back 4 or a back 3. He had 2 formations, which you like to alternate between. There wasn't really any difference between them, but I do think the fact they went away from the back 3 after the Portugal game doesn't necessarily mean that's been canned. I think you got to make the most of the players that you've got. And I think that's a lesson that the White Ferns have understood that for a long time, because they've been extremely reliant on their best 3 or 4 players to lead them to victory. Football Ferns, I don't think have had the same recognition as that, but I do think they are very reliant on their best players to perform. And if you don't have CJ Bott and Ali Riley in the starting lineup, which they didn't because of minor injuries for the second game against Argentina, and they play Argentina again tonight as well. Hopefully, big turnaround and nice victory there. Who knows? Might cloud some of what we're saying here. But if you don't have them, you don't pick a back three because you need your wing backs to be extremely important in that situation. So it's a little bit of like picking a team to suit the players that you've got. And if Bott and Riley are there, then the back three, I think, is quite a useful idea. I also like seeing a bit of Hannah Wilkinson and Grace Charlie up front together because I think that's something that maybe they just need to pivot towards now is like a level of understanding of like we're not going to be able to figure everything out between now and the World Cup. So maybe we just need to lean in towards what we're best at. And for the football Ferns, that doesn't mean being the most skillful players on the park. Like we just don't have that level of technical ability in our team. What we do have is a lot of really hard workers, pretty solid, well-organized defensive team who are always going to be. I actually found listening to some of the Americans talking and quite, you could almost say generous terms about the football Ferns, considering they won 9-0 over 2 games, like an aggregate score there. But some of those players would say things like, when asked about playing the thing of playing New Zealand's like, well, we always know they're going to be strong and physical and they're going to be tough to break down and things like this. Like there's a reputation there. And if America sees it, which, the country of America is notoriously ignorant of other countries around the place. So if they can see it, then the football Ferns surely understand in themselves. Just be the physical team. That is one thing I thought was a bit frustrating about the Portugal and Argentina games. So it felt like there were some of that FIFA refereeing can be a little bit finicky at times, a little bit picky in terms of, that looks like half a free kick, we're going to blow the whistle. And the stop-start nature of that does not help the football Ferns. Like they want to be able to push their opponents around a little bit, and if they don't get that leeway, then I think that limits them a little bit. But I do like that Wilkinson Jale combo up front. But yeah, the learning here isn't, the thing I've learned, the lesson isn't necessarily my lesson so much as the one I just want to teach everyone else, because I've said this for a while. It's like you got to look at the football Ferns in context to where they are compared to everyone else, and there is a frustrating sense that they might be going backwards. I don't think that's true. I think their squad, like a full strength squad right now for the football Ferns, is better than it's ever been. The depth is stronger. There's more professionals than ever before. I don't think their first 11 is as good as it has been, say, I don't know, 10 years ago when you had Abby Ursig and Amber Hearn both in the team. I think a reliable goal-scoring number 9 and one of the best centre-backs in the world makes a very big difference. Last time we saw that, I think last major tournament was probably the Olympics in Rio. I can't remember what year that was, 2016, something like that. 20 is one of them. So since then, I think there's been, in fact, you know what? There's actually a lot of crossover with the Blackcaps here too, because if you look at that World Test Championship, I was just saying, like if Jamieson and Bolt, you've just considered them unavailable, add them onto the Taylor, Watling, de Gronholm retirements, almost half that World Test Championship team is not there anymore. At least half, 5 out of 11 players are not playing in this series. That's a drastically different cricket team. And I looked at the World Cup squad from last time, because obviously they have a new coach since then. Tom Samani is no longer there. Yakikim Clover is the football Ferns coach. There are 8 players out of 23 who have retired since then. That's not including 1 or 2 players who just aren't on the football Ferns scene anymore because, I don't know, if they were picked to make up numbers or something, or they just were fringe players who haven't kicked on, sort of thing. At the highest level anyway. 8 out of 23 players alone just for retirement, including, I think, at least 3 of them, probably 4 of them are Centurions. How are you assuming that's the same team that what they've got now? It's not. And there's I don't know. There's a lack of recognition that women's football across the, because everyone talks about how big this World Cup is going to be. Why is this World Cup going to be so big? Because women's football has never been bigger. Why has women's football never been bigger? Because major clubs in Europe are investing in their women's teams. Basically, it's the main reason. Like the reason Italy got good is because Juventus started caring about a women's team. They put a women's team in. Their league is getting quite strong. Portugal, great example. We've never lost to Portugal before. We played them twice and beaten them twice. The difference is since then Portugal have got a proper women's premier going. A team like Benfica, I think Benfica and Sporting are the two teams that absolutely dominated. Like they're winning games 15-0 some weeks. It's not the greatest sign for the depth, but it shows that their top teams are very good because those teams, that Benfica team went on to qualify for the Champions League ahead of Vic Essend's Rangers team at the start of the season. Like they played a two-legged series against each other. It was quite interesting to watch because a lot of those Benfica teams players are in this Portuguese team right now that's just qualified for the World Cup. That's playing Champions League, like core of your team playing Champions League, playing professionally is going to impact nicely when you can just bring half that squad into your national team. Obviously, your national team is going to be, it's going to improve so much quicker that way. We don't have that. We don't have that proximity to the European money. We don't have proximity to that, just the professional atmosphere. We got a Wellington Phoenix team. That's great. It's existed for 1.5 years and is a little bit of a project team. It's still like, a lot of young players were picked for their potential, and that's similar to what we're saying about the White Ferns. That might pay off down the line. It's already paying off with a few players who have worked their way into Football Ferns contention. Mackenzie Berry, Kate Taylor, players like that. Michaela Foster, I would imagine. I don't know if the World Cup might come a little too soon for Millie Clegg, but definitely it will be Millie Clegg down the line. She's going to score a lot of goals for the Football Ferns. Desperately needed too, that kind of player. I struggle to fathom in what world a New Zealand football team shouldn't be underdogs. Because especially when you're playing against teams like Portugal and even Argentina aren't as good. Like the South American scene also is a bit isolated. They don't have the same, there's a little bit of a connection to the American stuff, but not really. And there's not so much going on to Europe. So outside of Brazil, South American teams aren't as strong as you think they should be. That's the only continent you can really say that about. Even like a lot of the African teams, because you've got the sort of colonial links with countries like France, they're kicking on pretty strong these days. Like all the European teams are really good. That Portuguese team would have cruised through qualifying in every other region. There's no way. The only reason they had to do the qualifying tournament is because they're from Europe and there's so many good European teams. In what way is the Football Fern, what way are they supposed to compete with that on an even thing? It's when we're establishing that they're rebuilding under a new coach. Like there's a lost context there. And that is not to say that they haven't underperformed or that they're playing to their potential, because they're not. Like there's things that need to be improved very quickly ahead of the World Cup, and that's where they cross into some White Ferns crossover as well. But the White Ferns have similar things, as you were saying, about like South Africa just has a much bigger population than us. So if they, take things completely seriously and we take things seriously, same amount of effort going into it, South Africa is going to do better because they have a bigger player pool to pick from and therefore more competition and all these kind of things. It's just a frustrating one where I think that context is lost with the Football Ferns, and I don't see why it should. I think people expect more from them than they're capable of, which is rough because it sets them up to fail. And I don't know. I couldn't help but wonder over the things that a good old fashioned Oceania Nations Cup wouldn't go astray right now. Like let's just go play Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and beat them 5-10-0 and get some confidence going. Like it wouldn't be the worst time for some of that. But unfortunately, the thing about hosting the World Cup is you get there automatically and you don't have to qualify.
Everything you just said about the Football Ferns as like building them up to beat them down. That's what we've talked about with the Warriors the whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
Is the people who complain about the Warriors also view them as like premiership contenders every year. It's like, what are you up to? But
it's like, at what point have they ever showed that they deserve that tag? You make up an imaginary expectation for them and then they don't live up to it. that's your problem, not theirs. You know.
I think, like, yeah, Abby Usyk wasn't playing for a bit. She's now retired from international footy, I think. But
Another comparison, yeah, she has another comparison. There is Abby Usyk and Trent Bolt. It feels like kind of similar situations there.
but what I'm thinking of is a difference between the football fans and the white fans. Like, I, it seems like I'm in my mind, I'm questioning myself, critical thinking, and I'm thinking, okay, like I can view the white fans through everything you just said about the football fans, right? And like all these teams, they're underdogs, they're competing. This is why New Zealand, Aotearoa, is the greatest sporting nation in the world, because all these teams are on a global scale, some more so than others.
Yep.
But the white ferns, like, their best players aren't selected. So like I don't know how to judge women's cricket in New Zealand is pretty good. But if you're looking at the white ferns, you're like, might not think that because the best players aren't selected. Like, the white ferns isn't a fair representation of the best women's cricketers in New Zealand right now. Whereas I think the football ferns is a pretty good gauge of who the best female footballers are in New Zealand. And that's like the best you've got. Whereas I think with the white ferns, since there's this thing of like, this is like, of course we're losing.
Yeah.
We don't have the best players from our country.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say add to that is the football ferns pick their best players in general. Like, there's the fact that there are even possible debates about selections these days. Like, I know a lot of people have wanted Michaela Foster in there, and I think there's a bit of a clamoring now for Millie Clegg as well, who are two of my absolute favorite players, who I was championing long before they were playing for the Phoenix. But at the same time, I also can see a similar thing to the Warriors. Like, a lot of the pressure about them picking Millie Clegg is coming about from the media too. Like, it's a little bit of a campaign there of saying we want her to be picked, and then when she's not, saying like, well, despite expectations that, or despite pressure to select young Emily Clegg and that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, you said that. Like, you put the pressure on, and now you're saying that they didn't listen to you, sort of thing is how that's going. I would like to see her in the World Cup squad, but I'm not going to kick up a fuss if she doesn't, because I understand that her value is in the future. She's 17 years old. It's not the here and now. And you got to be careful with young players too. Like, you push them too far too soon, you can have ramifications of that. So the football ferns, like, the fact that what I was saying, the fact that they can have debates about it is a very new thing. Because it used to be that there was filler in every football ferns World Cup squad. The way that, like, a good album might have 3 or 4 songs where it's like, yeah, that's all right. I like that song because I like the artist and I'm listening to that artist sing that song. But I don't know if it really needed to be in the album. Maybe they should have waited a little bit longer and worked on a couple more tunes. There was always a bit of that with the football ferns. There's less so now. I think that good players are going to miss out on the World Cup squad for the first time ever because of selections, not because of injuries. But I will say that in terms of picking their best squad, they try to, but an injury, like little injuries to players like, Riley and Bott have missed a lot of football recently, and they're two of their very best players. Rhea Percival is recovering from a serious knee injury, and she is maybe their best player. And also someone who you can just see the way she's so crucial to the way they're trying to play. Like, the one of the best players in the WSL, which is one of the best leagues in the world, one of the best players in that competition over the last 2 years at pressuring off the ball and playing in transition. Is like, that's how the football ferns should be playing it. It's how they want to play, and they just don't have the players right now to do that. Shout out to Amalia Steinmetz, though, who's shown a lot of potential in that regard. But not having Rhea Percival is a big deal to this team. And when you also don't have CJ Bott, and you don't have Vic Essen, who most of their best results under Klimkova have come, I think it's like 3 wins and 3 draws under Klimkova in that time, and 5 of those games have been with Vic Essen in goal. Like, I like Erin Naylor as a goalie. She's a very talented shot stopper. She is not the well-rounded keeper that Essen is in other aspects, though, and that shows. Like, not as good against the high ball, not as quick to come off the line, things like that. Like, Vic Essen has deservedly been the number 1 over the last 12 months, and she's not available for this tour. It's little things like that where it's like, they're a good team. They've got more depth than they've ever had before. Like the fact that there are even 3 good goalkeepers to choose from who could all feasibly do a job in a World Cup. That's never been the case in the past. But the drop off is quite quick when you have to move away from the first 11. I think we've seen that with the Blackcaps. I think we've seen that with the White Ferns because they refuse to pick their best 11 in situations. And it's definitely clear with the Football Ferns as well, where it's like, as good as some of the prospects are, they're not going to be as good as a player who's played 160 times for the Football Ferns and Ria Percival and plays for Tottenham Hotspur in one of the best leagues in the world and is one of their key players because guess what? Tottenham Hotspur haven't been as good this year without Ria Percival as well. They had their best ever finish last season when she had her best ever season. Without her this year, they're not that far above the relegation zone. They won't get relegated because they're better than that, but they've clearly not been as good of a team. It's the same thing as Steven Adams was saying at the start. Like the Memphis Grizzlies without Steven Adams is like Tottenham Hotspur without Ria Percival. It's the same. And so the Football Ferns naturally going to have the same problem, right? They're trying, they do pick their best players, they pick their best 11, all these things, but it's just little injuries. Like Rebecca Stott as well has not been available in this tour and has missed a lot of time for obvious reasons recently. Like good players not being able to play these games obviously affects what your ceiling is in terms of what kind of results you can expect against competitive teams, even against teams that you might expect to beat ordinarily. You don't put out your best team, it's less likely to happen. And that's definitely been a lesson from Football Ferns, but also definitely from White Ferns over the last 12, 24 months and potentially beyond that as well.
Let's put a bow on some of this footballing kōrero. And let's just get you did manage to whip up the Flying Kiwis. I don't know where you're sitting with the Wellington Phoenix, so I'll just leave that blank for now. Flying Kiwis, what's been your biggest learning over the past week or so?
Biggest learning. I don't know if I've got one, but I can do the quick bullet points of a couple of them. Because it's sort of a case-by-case basis with every player. I would say one for Chris Wood, he scores goals. He's off the mark. For Nottingham Forest, no dramas there. Like he's always going to score goals. You give him opportunities, he'll score goals. Also scoring a lot of goals at the moment is Katie Root in Scotland. And for playing for Hearts, who are the 4th best team in Scotland, like outside the big 3, they're the next ones. And I'm just going to suggest, it's not been picked in very many Football Ferns squads recently. She's playing in Scotland as well, which is another aspect of this. Might be the Lee Kasprick of the Football Ferns. I'm going to chuck out also Libby Kakache, played in the last 2 games for Empoli when the superstar left back who's been starting ahead of him did the old Luis Suarez thing where he stuck a hand up and blocked a ball on the line and got sent off. So Kakache played the last 60 minutes after the red card in that game and then played the full game in the next one. He might be a backup for them because Fabiano Parisi is really good. Fabiano Parisi also likely to be sold in the off season. Libby Kakache, every time he plays Serie A, never looks out of place. Like there's obvious things he could improve in, but he always looks like he can do a solid job whenever he gets called upon. That's great. What else should I chuck in? I'll say Joe Bell looks like he's back in the starting 11 sort of mix for Bromby now that they've got a new manager in place. Love to see some of that. And also, I'm going to predict very big second seasons at Sligo Rovers in Ireland for Nando Painica and Max Mata, both of whom played full games on the weekend as they got a draw against the top team, perennial champs, Shamrock Rovers of Ireland. And both of them were also selected for the league's team of the week in week 1. So I think there's big things coming up for both of those guys. That's 5 of them. That'll do. Wellington Phoenix, I will just say, because I did watch the game. I didn't get to write about it, but I did watch their game using up some of my free data. Vodafone came in clutch there, actually. They gave me they sent me a text being like, you can have 100 gigs of free data for getting hit by a cyclone. Thank you. That's nice of you. Can I have a free phone charger, some kind of solution there as well? Because my phone can't handle that much streaming, but just had to go for a drive every now and then to charge it up in the car is the way to do that. But did watch that Phoenix game, and I will say they're a really good team when they score a second goal and when they score their penalties. Do those things, they're going to win a lot more games over the rest of the season. When they don't do those things, we've seen what that looks like because they keep blowing 1-0 leads after scoring early. But yeah, against whoever they were playing last week, I think it might have been MacArthur or Western or one of them buggers. It was in my powerless haze, so I can't remember exactly, but they kicked on and they won 3-0 and they scored a couple of absolute bangers as well. Jan Stas and Bozidar Kraja both scored great goals. Savada scored from the penalty spot. That's what you got to do. They're a really good team when they actually make the most of their opportunities and don't sit on 1-0 leads, actually score that second goal, go kill teams off, show that ruthless streak. Hopefully that's what we get from them for the rest of the season, because if they do that, I don't know, man, they might have a Breakers-esque playoff run in them. Who knows?
I have a rugby league idea that I'd just like to throw out there to finish with. I did mention on the Patreon podcast earlier in the week as part of the Kiwi NRL Spotlight segment. It is an idea about a Northlander, young Dylan Brown.
Harris? Oh, the other one.
Well, I think I could do I don't know, that's a good one. Who's the James Fisher-Harris comparison battle? It might be like a Payne Haas. Who's better? I'd say, like, many people might think Payne Haas is the man, blah, blah, blah. I think James Fisher-Harris is a winner. I think James Fisher-Harris is better. I think it's a bit different to what I'm going to throw up because I personally, I've got James Fisher-Harris as my best middle forward in the world, and I've got...
Yeah, I think most people would have him top 5 as well. So he's like an established superstar of his position. So probably fewer debates.
And what I'm saying is he's number 1. So there's no comparison that can even come close to, right? Like he's number 1. I think...
Alone on the mountaintop.
James Fisher-Harris, number 1 prop. Joseph Tapine, number 1 lock. Because I think he is moving from prop to lock this season, maybe with the Canberra Raiders. If they're both playing prop, I don't know what to do. 1A, 1B. But, we'll settle for the positional variety. Because my comparison is Dylan Brown and Kalyn Ponga as halves. So this is the inverse. Like, some would say Kalyn Ponga is the top 5 dude, and not many people might look at Dylan Brown as the top 5 dude. Although I think Dylan Brown's a better half than Kalyn Ponga. And Dylan Brown's only 22 years old. Where are we at with Kalyn Ponga? Kalyn Ponga's 24 now. Kalyn Ponga's been around the NRL for a few years longer, since 2016. And this is relevant this season because we have started the season with Kalyn Ponga starting in the halves for the Newcastle Knights. Dylan Brown's position, number 6. And kind of goes without saying, if Kalyn Ponga's at fullback, I think he's a far better fullback than he is a half. And if he's at fullback, I think he can be a better player than Dylan Brown. I will throw up the idea, I don't know if it's like if he is a better winning player than Dylan Brown. Because as long as Dylan Brown's got a good halfback beside him to steer the team around, Dylan Brown's a great tackler, good runner. And those are winning aspects of rugby league. Can I just go on a tangent?
Go for it.
I'm learning, we've talked a bit about the potential of performance, and to win, you need established players. And to win, you need reliable players. So my learning about the Warriors is that their additions are those type of players. Tomato Martin, been in the NRL for a few seasons now. When he played for the Broncos last season at fullback, the Broncos won 5 or 6 games in a row. Manata Niokore, he's a winning player from the Parramatta Eels, been around for a few seasons. Mitch Barnett might not have won so much with Newcastle Knights, but he's ruthless, rips in, and he's been around for at least 4 or 5 seasons. Jackson Ford, who knows if he's a winning player? He could be a winning player because he does all the small details, but he's just been around for a couple of seasons. Like, he's been on the grind. He knows what to do. All the Warriors recruits fit that mold, first and foremost. One of them more so, Mr. Nickel Klokstad, who, yeah, he's not going to throw the cutout passes like Reece Walsh, but he catches bombs. You know, he stops the ball. He stops opposition players. He's usually in the right spot. He rips in the whole game. Every run he's trying to get between defenders. And I'm learning that that's a winning fullback. I don't know if the one he replaced has those skills to his game as far as winning. Because you look at the best fullbacks in the NRL, they take 20 hit-ups. And they don't make mistakes. They make 200 meters. They're always in the right spot defensively. They can stop blokes. James Tedesco. Dylan Edwards for the Panthers. Clint Gutherson for the Eels. Ryan Pappenhausen is different in this mold because he's more of the smaller, quicker fullback. But he's at the Storm, so it kind of goes without saying. Tom Trbojevic, he's a big body. He's not a Reece Walsh or a Kalyn Ponga type of fullback. Like, the best fullbacks in the NRL are reliable, they are physical, and they rip in. And I think the Warriors have that type of fullback who might not be as good, but he is that type of fullback. And I've been learning about that throughout this preseason trial, because what we got the Warriors comparison to the Broncos and the Bulldogs. I'll throw that up again. And I have noted a lot of celebration of the Reece Walsh fullback play. But I think Nickel Klokstad's going to be better for the Warriors. Oh, that's my tangent. So I'll swing back around to this key idea of Dylan Brown and Kalyn Ponga playing number 6 in the NRL. And I just want to throw it out there so everyone knows what we are working with as far as celebrating Dylan Brown as an NRL half. He is he's better tackler. He misses fewer tackles. He's a better runner as a half, I believe. North-south running, engaging defenders in front of you. Less running sideways to set up other blokes, straightening up the attack. And Dylan Brown's got great footwork, but his step is a bit Kalyn Ponga-esque. Like, Dylan Brown will step you, for sure. He can do everything else. He can pass, he can kick. He's a bigger body. He's more physical. I believe Dylan Brown is a better half, a better number 6 than Kalyn Ponga, and I'm fascinated to see how that plays out over the opening rounds of the season. Because if that happens, those two teams are going in very different directions.
Well, they already sort of were going in different directions, weren't they?
Yeah, but like
the Eels have had a couple of very strong years, but
I'm applying the Warriors logic here. Like, every season you got to refresh.
True.
Because like FYI,
every year is a fresh start. Wipe the slate clean.
Because if the Warriors suck,
start again.
If the Warriors suck by August, I'm not talking about them. But you got to refresh it every season, and I'm happy to do that with the Knights. I've certainly got an undercurrent, an undertone in how I view the Knights. But I'm happy to let Kalyn Ponga and his team, because he is a leader of the Knights, I'm happy to let Kalyn Ponga and his team prove this hypothesis wrong.
Yeah, but they've lost Mitch Barnett, so what are you going to do?
He's a winner.
Yeah, well, he almost said that when you said Mitch Barnett in the list of thing, and then like, but maybe not as many wins with the Knights. It'll be like, yeah, but that's Kalyn Ponga's fault, isn't it? He's not leading them to victories like he should be.
One other interesting thing, last 4 years of their respective careers. Dylan Brown, games played 15, 18, 21, 28. Kalyn Ponga, games played 20, 19, 15, 14. Kalyn Ponga's games played looks like Henry Nicholls' batting average year on year in Test cricket. It's going down. It's going down. So I'm curious to see how many games they've played total. 97 games for Kalyn Ponga, 82 games for Dylan Brown.
Who, as we've established, is 2 years younger.
And he debuted 3 years later.
Which was still as a teenager. So they both had quick starts to their careers, that's for sure.
How are you feeling about that hypothesis? Like, is it, because in my mind it makes complete sense. I'm for sure, unless I'm proven wrong, I'm for sure believe in myself.
Well, the wording is the key point, because it's the who's the better half. And I think you've got a very fair case there for Dylan Brown. If you're saying strictly who's the better player, it's hard to ignore Ponga's X factor abilities, which are very well known. Even though Dylan Brown, as you rightly say, he has a bit of that in his game too. It is more underrated. I don't think he gets the recognition for that. I don't really think he gets the recognition for a lot of his game in general, partly because a couple high-profile other playmakers at the Eels who probably catch some of that spotlight ahead of him. Maybe that puts him in a little bit of a Steven Adams situation. I don't know, where it's like the dude who makes Mitch Moses and Clint Gutherson better by his presence, by what he does, without getting the all-star recognition kind of thing, in the same way that Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. are the best players on the Memphis Grizzlies, but they wouldn't be as good as they are without Steven Adams, who, as it happens, is also an extremely underrated player who alone, but regardless of what he does for others, alone, the things he does just in general make him so much better than people realize. I think Dylan Brown's higher up than that if we're going to take that comparison further, because Steven Adams isn't someone who's going to make all-star teams or things like that, whereas Dylan Brown is legit like a starting international half and will at some point get the recognition where people notice he's one of the best halves in the game, probably sooner rather than later, now that the Eels have had a couple of strong seasons, really hammering at home with postseason runs. But it's a little bit of a, he still feels like a little bit of a best kept secret type superstar in a way, where maybe it's just as simple as he's not Australian, so it doesn't quite catch the same media hype. I don't know, but it does feel like there is some of that still with him, where it's there's a level of recognition which he deserves but hasn't yet attained.
One other fun stat here is Dylan Brown's played less games. He's got 54 wins. Win percentage 66%. Kalyn Ponga with the Knights, this is actually a similar amount of games because it's with the Knights. So 82 games, Dylan Brown, Eels. 88 games for Kalyn Ponga at the Knights. Kalyn Ponga, 88 games, 37 wins. Dylan Brown, 82 games, 54 wins. Kalyn Ponga, 42% winning. Dylan Brown, 66% winning. Two different teams for sure, but Dylan Brown's quite good at being a half. And another important detail here, Dylan Brown, 4 seasons, he has made more than 300 tackles every season. 336 tackles his first season, 456 tackles his second season. Last 2 seasons, he's made over 600 tackles. Again, that's boosted by playing finals footy. But the point is that if you're a half, you need to be making tackles. You're going to be making tackles because you get this a lot in basketball. You're going to be targeted if you're a bad defender. They're going to run all sorts of plays at you. You're going to be isolated. You're going to get targeted. Same thing in cricket.
And especially in the finals as well. When you get to playoffs, finals type things, that playoff run makes that even more impressive in a way. Right? It adds extra games, which tallies up the numbers, but it also everyone's looking for matchups in finals basketball, finals, footy, all of these things. And halves are generally an easy one. So that has just not been the case with Dylan Brown. Like he's not the weak link whatsoever. I mean, he's as good a defensive half as there is, basically.
Dylan Brown's made over 600 tackles in each of his last 2 seasons. The most tackles Kalyn Ponga has made in a season is 113.
That's some fullback numbers right there. Is what that is.
So Kalyn Ponga, like his last 3 seasons, he's made less than 55 tackles in a season. So yeah, of course, those numbers are going to be very different. But what happens in the first 6 rounds of the NRL? Is Kalyn Ponga going to be making half of his 20 tackles a game? Is Kalyn Ponga going to be running straight when he needs to? You know, like that's what Dylan Brown does.
And these are also the first questions that opposition coaches are going to be asking at the start of the season. It's like, well, Ponga wants to play halves. We're going to run at him. Like James Fisher-Harris, where you at? Like, here's the ball. That guy right there, you target him.
Manatini Okori. You run at Kalyn Ponga.
Yeah. Run at him with your center / back rower skill set. / front rower skill set.
Yeah. / bench utility skill set. He's like that good where it's just, yeah.
That's, you can play 4 positions at a thing, you're doing all right. Check him in the halves next to Dylan Brown and see what happens. That actually could have happened last season. They were on the same team for a while there. It could have happened.
You'd be a physical team if you got Dylan Brown and Manatini Okori as your halves pairing. You'd be physical. Let's just say that. That is the niche cast. Big up yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy Aotearoa. Enjoy the sport. Big up. Church.